Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Susan Kaiser Greenland this afternoon. She was a pioneer in bringing mindfulness and meditation into our schools. And she actually started out as a corporate lawyer from 1988 through 2005, representing major television networks and radio stations. So, but during that time, she developed her inner kids model while she was volunteering in public schools, teaching secular mindfulness. I had a chance to attend a workshop she did after she released her Mindful Games book in 2016. And when at the beginning of that workshop, she told a story about how she got from lawyering to mindfulness, which is a great story. Maybe she'll share it with us during the Q&A time. But what impressed me from the story was the scientifically rigorous and kind of results-oriented perspective that she brings to her work with mindfulness and kids. She was co-investigator on several UCLA research studies using her Inner Kids elementary school program, looking at the impact of mindfulness in education. And that research was published in the Journal of Applied School Psychology. You can look that up if you're interested in the details of how this is really well grounded in the research. She collaborated with the creators of the app Stop, Breathe, Think to develop an app for children called Stop, Breathe, Think Kids. And she's currently finishing up a book, Everyday Enlightenment, and that's going to be published by Shambhala Publications. I don't think the date is set for that, but you can be looking for that. I'm excited to read that when it's done. If you want more information about her work, she has a great website. It's beautiful, illustrated by a wonderful children's illustrator. And it's just susankaisergreenland.com, so it's easy to find. You can find out about her books. You can watch videos of the Mindful Games. You can learn about the Inner Kids program, and you can register for upcoming retreats and trainings, all kinds of stuff. It's a great website. So what we're going to see this afternoon is a lecture that Susan recorded for a symposium in China. The presentation covers information from her book, The Mindful Child, and from the Mindful Games material. In the presentation, Susan refers to several activities from the Mindful Games book, and we'll be seeing Susan demonstrate a few of these mindful activities also today, which is a real treat. We'll start right now with a mindful game that Susan calls Patience. It's partly just a simple relaxation meditation, which I think is a good way to start every meeting and every presentation that you attend. All of these practices are geared towards children and adolescents. So you'll hear Susan referencing the audience might be feeling bored or restless, and she'll use examples that are relevant to kids. But as she discusses in the main part of her presentation today, of course, these practices are useful for all ages, and I think you'll enjoy them. So let's get started. Amanda, if you're ready to run that first patience video, we'll take a look.
Hi, I'm Susan Kaiser Greenland, and I am just so very happy to be here practicing mindfulness with you today. One of the terrific things about mindfulness is that it helps us develop these universal qualities that are in us all the time. And one of those qualities is patience. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, in how mindful listening helps develop and build and grow the quality of patience. I don't know about you, but I can tell you that that's a quality that I think needs a little boosting in me sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. So, you ready to get started? So, let's start by just noticing the sensations in our body. Right now, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your body feeling? Do you feel rested or tired? Take a second to check in and see how you feel. Does your mind feel busy or does it feel quiet or calm or focused? Check in and see how that goes. Any emotions there? Feelings like boredom, maybe your mom or your teacher is making you watch this. Feelings like excitement. I wonder what this is. Feelings like happiness. I'm here with friends and family. Feelings like sadness. Anything at all. All these feelings are just feelings. It's okay, whatever they are. The point with mindfulness and awareness is just that we notice them and that we give them a lot of space and allow them to come and go. Okay, you ready to develop some patience with mindful listening? Terrific. Okay, first I want you to either just get comfortable. You can sit or you can stand, or frankly, you can even lie down. If you're sitting, rest your hands easy on your lap. If you're standing, allow your arms and your hands to rest easy by your side. And just allow your back to be straight and relaxed. Start by just grounding ourselves in the feeling of our feet against the ground or the floor or the carpet or wherever you are. Just feel your feet. Now I'd like you to take one hand and put it over your heart. Now this on its own, just this soothing, supporting touch of putting your hand over your heart can be a very good strategy to help us center ourselves, to feel more balanced and grounded, and then we're better able to be patient. So let's feel our hand over our heart. Make sure your shoulders relax and your arm. Now feel your breath. Move that hand up and down, up and down, up and down. All right, now let's rest your hands easy on your lap again or by your sides. And then let's just patiently wait for the first sound. What do you think it'll be? Listen. Let's see. See if you can stay with that sound all the way to the end. Did you hear it all the way to the end? How did that feel? That's a loud sound. How did it feel in your body when you heard a loud sound? Okay, let's try it again. You want to try another sound? See how that helps you feel, or how your body and your mind feel when you listen? Okay, let's get ready again. Back's pretty straight, body's relaxed, hands easy on your lap or down by your side. If you'd like to close your eyes, close your eyes. That really helps with mindful listening, but if you're not comfortable closing your eyes, that's okay. Okay, ready? Settle in and either feel your breathing for a moment or feel your feet against the ground. And listen, you don't need to look for the sounds, just wait for them to come to you. Did you hear it? That's a softer sound. Notice how that feels. What do you think? Is it different than the loud sound? Listening to the softer sound? Listen again. See if you can stay with the sound for the whole time I'm ringing the bell. Just stay with it. If your mind wanders, that's okay. Just bring it back to the sound of the bell. Okay. If you're comfortable, close your eyes and listen. You can open your eyes now for a second. You ready for another sound? Can you tell the difference between how you feel when you're listening to loud sounds and soft sounds? Or maybe you don't feel any different at all. Okay, let's try again. Back pretty straight and relaxed. Feet flat on the ground, whether you're sitting or standing. Hands resting easy on your lap or easy by your side. Close your eyes if you can. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. If you're not, that's okay. And listen. I wonder what sound is going to come next. What do you think? How was that sound? Was it different than the others? Do you feel the same or different? Okay, let's just listen again. And this time, just try to stay with the sound for as long as I'm making the sound. You start thinking, that's okay. That's what all of us do. But just notice you're thinking. You're not trying to push those thoughts away. You're not trying to get rid of them, but just notice them and put most of your attention on listening to the sound. Those other thoughts will stay in the background maybe, but they're not the most important thought right now. Right now, we're listening. Okay, you ready? Back pretty straight, body's relaxed. Hands easy on your lap or by your side. Eyes closed if that's comfortable for you. If not, that's okay. And listen. Stay with the sound. If you start thinking, that's okay. Just bring it back to the sound. And rest. Feeling your feet on the ground. You won't put your hand on your chest. Feel the movement of your breath and your hands back on your lap. Okay, I've got one last sound for you, and this is a very, very cool sound. Are you ready? You know what to do. You know the drill. Get ready with your back pretty straight, whether you're standing or sitting, your muscles relaxed, your eyes closed if you're comfortable closing your eyes, and your hands resting easy on your lap or by your sides. And just close your eyes if you can and listen. And try to stay with this sound all the way to the end. I can still hear it. Can you? I still hear it. Okay, open your eyes. What'd you think? What'd you think about that sound? How did that sound make you feel? Hey, I want to try that same sound in a little different way, maybe a surprising way. So remember, you don't have to look for the sound. Just wait for it, patiently wait for it and listen. You ready? Back straight, body's relaxed, hands easy, eyes closed if you can, and listen. Stay with the sound. Stay with it. How cool was that? That is my favorite of all the sounds. I hope you liked it too. So we can mindfully listen to these kind of sounds with special instruments, or we can listen mindfully to the sounds around us. So wherever you are, you don't need to chase the sounds. They will come to you. And just know the drill. Your body relaxed, your mind open. Don't try to push away thoughts, but keep most of your attention on listening. Those other thoughts in the background, they're just going to come and go. Well, thank you very much for practicing mindfulness with me today. I so enjoyed it, and I hope that it was helpful. Thank you.
So I hope you're feeling relaxed and refreshed from that meditation. The main presentation will be coming up next. As I said, it was recorded for a symposium in China. When it was presented in China, it had Chinese subtitles. So Susan is speaking in English, have no fear. We'll hear it as it was originally recorded. And as far as I know, Susan does not speak Chinese, so you shouldn't have any trouble understanding her. So if we can go ahead and get that next video running.
Hi, my name is Susan Kaiser Greenland, and I'm so very happy to be here presenting to you today at this mindfulness conference. Today, I'm going to talk about mindful games and offer an introduction to activity-based mindfulness for children, for educators, for clinicians, and for parents. This presentation is based on a program I've developed over 25 years or more called the Inner Kids Program here in the United States. So what we're going to talk about today is basically everyday freedom. How with focused attention, with a strong capacity to regulate emotion, and with the ability to see what's happening within and around us clearly, we can free ourselves from emotional reactivity. In a very real way, that's emotional freedom. The life skills that lead to this emotional freedom can be learned, they're trainable, they're available to absolutely everyone. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about qualities and life skills that are developed when we practice mindfulness and meditation. And we'll also talk about mindful games that help children and caregivers recognize those qualities and grow those life skills. But before we get into that part of the program, I want to talk about something that is often left out of these types of presentations on secular mindfulness, especially secular mindfulness in the context of children and family, very practical presentations about how mindfulness is helpful. Really important stuff. But what sometimes gets left out is the experience of mindfulness itself. That felt sense that we have when we practice, where sometimes we get a glimpse of an enduring sense of calm. Sometimes we have this aha moment where we feel completely connected to everyone and everything. Sometimes we feel just part of a much vaster, much greater universe. And we can tap into this innate human experience of connectedness, of compassion, of love, frankly, at any time and everywhere. And we have an easier time accessing it often as we practice mindfulness and meditation. So everyone can tap into this experience, and our capacity to tap into it and extend it a little bit longer actually grows stronger with training and practice, just as these life skills and qualities that we're talking about in this program grow stronger with training and practice. But honestly, most people who come to me or to people who do the type of work I do, asking for information on mindfulness in kids, are not as interested in the experience of mindfulness, because what they're looking for is help, and they're looking for help pretty fast. They need help to manage stress, to manage meltdowns, to manage power struggles in their family, and they're hoping that mindfulness and meditation will do just that. So let's first talk about the practical ways that mindfulness and meditation are helpful. And then at the very end of this presentation, we'll circle back and just take a minute or two to talk again about this experience of life, of mindfulness and meditation, and how it can be transformative. The main point I hope you take away from this presentation is that mindfulness and meditation develop a set of trainable life skills that improve our well-being and make us better citizens of the world. And this type of development, this type of growth, this type of training can start at a very, very young age. And what does it look like? It looks like we first look inside so that we can better understand ourselves. And through that process, we better understand other people and the world around us. So this idea of personal development first, starting by looking inward, is something that many caregivers bump up against, because to them, with all the best intentions, it feels a little self-centered or narcissistic. It feels as if they would be better off spending their time making some more money for the kids, doing chores around the house, or actually playing with them than going off on their own to sit on a cushion or in a chair and meditate. So how do we get caregivers to buy in when they feel that their time is better spent with their kids than on their own personal development? It's by encouraging them to understand that there is a beneficial ripple effect in this work. That as we better understand ourselves, as we become more comfortable with ourselves and with the wide range of emotions and experiences that bubble up in us, that experience of mindfulness will actually have a ripple effect, and it will ripple out to all of those people around us. Why? Because if we're just a little bit less neurotic, if we're just a little better regulated, if we're just a little happier and more content and more joyful, if we're just a little better able to navigate the stress and strain of everyday life, that just impacts everybody around us in a beneficial way. So when caregivers start to understand this ripple effect, then they tend to buy in and are better able to carve out the time for a little personal development first, before starting to share mindfulness and meditation and what they learn through their own inner work with the children and their families. So let's talk a bit about the Inner Kids model. Inner Kids has been around for over 25 years. I think I mentioned that already up front. We've worked with families, we've worked with parents, we've worked with schools. It's a model primarily, a model for how to drop mindfulness activities or mindful games into your daily life. We've worked with researchers over the years, and our program was one of the first peer-reviewed control group programs published in the field of mindfulness and education. So let's start with the elements of the Inner Kids program, starting with 3 qualities that are trainable. 3 universal qualities that are trained through the practice of mindfulness and meditation. The first is attention, the second is balance, and the third is compassion. We present these in a linear way, although the sequence is not always linear, but generally we train first in attention and then move into emotional balance and compassion. These 3 qualities are closely related to 6 life skills that are also specifically trained and developed through the practice of mindfulness and meditation. Those life skills are focusing, quieting, seeing, reframing, caring, and connecting. And the way our presentation here is laid out, we're going to go through these qualities of attention, balance, and compassion, and the life skills of focusing, quieting, seeing, reframing, caring, and connecting sequentially, and see what that looks like in the real life of kids and families. So we start with these 3 qualities, attention, balance, and compassion, that develop 6 life skills: focusing, quieting, seeing, reframing, caring, and connecting. And we also teach universal themes that really make up the mindfulness and the worldview that is the foundation of mindfulness and meditation. And those universal themes are themes like patience and how everything is dependent on other things. Everything is interdependent. And change, how everything is changing all the time. And kindness. Those are examples of many, many themes that we teach in this program. So in addition to the qualities, the life skills, and the themes, we use several methods that come from long-standing contemplative practices to help develop these life skills and these qualities. And the methods we use range from an anchor method where we focus on one thing to the exclusion of all else, to open awareness method where we pay attention to the full range of experience, to movement, to visualization, to analytical practices. So these are various methods that we use in the program to develop these life skills and qualities. So if you want an overview of what those elements of the Inner Kids program look like, this slide will give you that. It shows you the 3 qualities and how they relate to focusing. It shows you the 3 qualities and how they relate to the life skills, to the contemplative methods, and to the selected themes. So the Inner Kids program is taught through a sequence that loosely follows the scientific method. And that sequence is play, practice, share, and apply. First, we play and we have some fun. That's actually not necessarily part of the scientific method. And then we practice, which is we look at what is the experience, whether it's an inner experience or an outer experience. The scientific method can be loosely described as see first and analyze later. And then we share and apply. When sharing, we analyze, we talk about what it is that we experienced, and then apply, we talk about how this experience can actually be useful in everyday life. And so that sequence is a great way for us to take a look inside ourselves, to have some conversation around what it means to contextualize that experience, and then to talk about how we can apply that experience in daily life. And this sequence can be done with kids as early as preschool and also for adults. And the life skills and the qualities and the themes that we're talking about are, as I mentioned before, taught largely through activities, through mindful games and takeaways that people can drop into their daily routines, even when life is busy and hectic. These games can be dropped in and just be a couple of breaths, a couple of seconds, or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Doesn't take a lot of time to interrupt what you're doing to drop in a brief mindful game and moment of awareness. So let's start with that first quality, the quality of attention, and the life skills, quieting and focusing. So quieting and focusing are 2 extremely important life skills, and we put them up first here because it is very difficult for kids to be able to get beyond these, to get into the area of analysis or seeing what's happening or reframing or caring and connecting when their nervous systems are all worked up. And so let's talk a little bit about what that is. In order to understand this point, you need to know a little bit about mindfulness, stress, and the nervous system. So the stress response is a little bit like an inner watchdog, and it is an ancient survival mechanism that helps to keep us safe. So the job of this inner watchdog is to sense for danger and to respond to danger. And when they sense that danger, they protect us by activating the sympathetic nervous system and shifting into a reactive mode that's called fight, flight, or freeze. It's a survival mechanism that we're born with, and it's really, really useful. It gives us the energy we need to flee or to fight when we are in a dangerous situation. How does it do that? It releases hormones like adrenaline that make our hearts beat faster and increases the speed of our breathing and the blood flow to our muscles. When that happens, most of our energy is focused on surviving, right? On fighting or fleeing or freezing. And we don't have much energy left to think, to listen, to learn, or to be open to new ideas. So the fight, flight, and freeze response is a life-saving reaction to sudden physical danger. But sometimes stress leads us to respond as if we're in physical danger when actually we're not. So all stress isn't the same. Some stress is healthy stress, we need it, and it helps us to be alert and active and to push ourselves out of our comfort zone into more of our learning or our stretch zone. And some stretch is just a little too much, and then that puts us into overwhelm. So if your stress response gets triggered for too long and too often by pressures like homework or thoughts like I don't have any friends or I'm going to fail or the kind of things that are on kids' minds a lot, that can really exhaust them. It can exhaust them mentally and physically. So the Yerkes-Dodson law is a law that is helpful to understand. And it's the idea that you try to find the just right level of stress. So if you take a look at this slide here, you'll see that at the very top, there's somebody who's dressed in yellow and he is open, receptive, ready to learn. He has just enough stress so that he's alert and he's motivated, but not so much that he's slipped off into overwhelm. So if you get a little too much stress, if there's a little too much input, you can slip off onto one or the other side of this curve, either into fight or flight, that guy in the red. You know, we all are pretty good at recognizing fight or flight is when somebody is just losing it and kind of going off, you know, on something or somebody. Or they can slip into the blue, which is freeze mode. And especially with kids, this is something that we often miss. We often miss seeing when the child retreats, when the child slumps down, when the child is spending a lot of time in the room, tired. We often don't see that as part of this stress response and that the stress has gotten to be a little bit too much. So one way to think about this is to think about the stress response as being more like a dimmer switch or a fader on a volume control. It's not an on-off switch like a light switch. And you can dial up or dial down the amount of input to find that just right level of stress. And that's where mindfulness and meditation and simple awareness are very, very helpful. It allows you to notice when you're under pressure and where that dimmer switch is set. And if the if the dimmer switch is not set at that just right level of stress, if it's set a little bit too high and we're going into overwhelm, or a little bit too low and we don't have enough energy to really get the job done, we can then use mindful games and mindfulness exercise to help us find the right balance, to find that just right level of pressure so you can do the things you want to do without feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. So that's a description of something called the Yerkes-Dodson law. So that's where that inner watchdog, remember we were talking about mindfulness as being an inner watchdog? That's where that inner watchdog comes in very, very helpful. That type of awareness can help us find balance by letting us know when that switch is dialed too far up or too far down. Another thing that's important to remember when you're thinking about mindfulness or stress in general is that our mental response to stress changes how our bodies respond, both physically. Our mental response to stress changes our physical response to stress. So let's talk a little bit more about that. When we're stressed, our minds and our bodies tense up. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but when you feel stressed, my guess is that you feel that your body is tight and there's tension there. And similarly, the mind, your bandwidth narrows and you have less of a bandwidth to be open to new ideas, to be able to think, to be able to learn. But when you are, even if you find that you are tensed, if you notice that and you engage in relaxation practices that help your body relax, just like this guy in the orange chair, you can see compared to the guy in the green chair who was very tense, the guy in the orange chair is more open and relaxed. And as the body opens and relaxes, the mind tends to open, become more spacious and relaxed too. So that's one of the reasons why we talk to kids and caregivers about how our minds change our bodies and our bodies change our minds. That sometimes the best way to manage our tension, our physical strength tension, or our busy mind, or our narrow bandwidth, is not by paying attention to our mind, but by paying attention to our body. If we notice we're stressed, if we notice our mind is feeling constricted, to then move our attention into our body and to relax and to soften and to breathe or listen to sounds. And as our bodies and our start to relax, then our minds will open too. So there's all sorts of different mindfulness-based strategies that do just this, where we basically take our attention and we move it away from engaging with what we're thinking about, and we bring it to our body, like the feeling of breathing, the sounds in the room, the feeling of our feet against the floor, the feeling of our hands on the lap. Many of you may have seen an exercise with either a snow globe or a glitter ball, where we shake up the glitter ball and we see all of the snow. And that shows kids how when we get all worked up, sometimes our minds get so very busy that they cloud our perspective. But if we stop, if we feel our breathing, if we settle, then we're able to relax, open up. All of that activity in our mind can settle a little bit, and then we can see more clearly, just like you can see through a glitter ball when it's held still. So now let's move to the quality of balance. Emotional balance that helps kids navigate the ups and downs of daily life. And two of the life skills that we're going to talk about here are focusing and seeing. So remember, once our nervous system is a little bit calmer, if we're not feeling overwhelmed, then we have the bandwidth to be open to new ideas, to be able to listen and learn. And so then we have the bandwidth to be able to see what's happening in and around us more clearly. So one definition of mindfulness that I really like is that mindfulness is a mirror of what's happening now. It's a mirror of what's happening in the present moment that accurately reflects what's happening in our inner world and our outer world, so that we see what's happening. And we also see the additional layer of thoughts and emotions and stories to what's actually happening. There's a couple of stances of attention that we train practicing mindfulness. The first one is the spotlight of attention. That's a narrow beam of light, a little bit like a flashlight, and it focuses in on one thing. So this is really a technique to develop concentration. And this is the technique we primarily use with the younger kids who are concrete thinkers, and they are well able to focus in on one thing and ignore distractions. So that's more the spotlight of attention. The floodlight of attention, the more open stance of attention, comes online a little bit later with kids developmentally. And that's more like a wide open floodlight, where you still do see what is being illuminated by the spotlight, but you also see the full range of experience as well, everything that's happening. And in that floodlight of attention, one of the ways I describe that to people is by talking about what it's like when you drive a car. You know, when you drive a car, you are primarily looking at the road ahead, right? That's where most of your focus is, but you don't block what's happening on the side, what's happening in the side mirrors. You don't block what's happening in the rear view mirror. If someone's in the back seat, you're not blocking that out. And there might even be a song playing on the radio, and you can be listening to that too. You can have the whole range of experience, hold it in your attention while primarily focusing on the road ahead. And that's a good way of thinking about what this more open stance of attention is, this floodlight of attention. So when do we use the floodlight and the spotlight of attention? We use it at different times, but for the purposes of this presentation, a real good thing to keep in mind is that that floodlight of attention, where you're focusing in on one thing and nothing else, is really, really helpful when we are managing overwhelm. When we are able to bring that mind, like I said, into your body, and just for the time being, not pay a lot of attention to what's happening in our mind, but mostly to sensation in our body, or to sounds, that kind of thing. That's when the spotlight of attention is particularly useful, especially with very young kids. Now, if you're a trained meditator, you have a lot of experience, that advice would be a little bit different. Then at that point, if you're out feeling overwhelmed and you've got a lot of experience with meditation, resting in an open awareness could also be very, very helpful. So that's why we have to pay attention to the levels of practice when we are teaching different people, and also pay attention to the developmental appropriateness of certain practices at certain ages, what the kids actually can do and are comfortable doing. So what do we do when our minds become busy or when we start to feel overwhelmed when we're meditating? Because when we do sit down and we start to look at our inner worlds, we're likely to have some feelings come up, and sometimes those feelings are strong. And when we're sharing this with kids, we want to give them and adults real simple tools right away that are going to help them manage strong feelings if they come up and start to feel overwhelming. And one of the first things just to remember to do is if your eyes are closed, just open them. If you're feeling strong feelings, just open your eyes. Take a little break. That break could be just a second or two, and then you can go back to the practice. One of the things that is important to remember is that thinking about the overwhelm, thinking about what's upsetting you is often just going to generate more thoughts. There's a thought experiment that you guys may be well aware of, which is this idea of trying not to think about a pink elephant. Just for a second, see if you can not think about a pink elephant. Well, you know what happens when you're trying not to think about a pink elephant. Pretty soon that's all you're thinking about. And that thought experiment makes a lot of sense when you think about what happens when we get upset, right? If we keep thinking about what we're upset about, if we keep thinking about what we're focused on, there tends to be an escalation of thoughts. And that's why when we notice that happening, we're able to, we don't push those thoughts away, but we move that primary attention, like when we're driving, right? That primary attention to a felt sense experience of in our body, or into listening to sound, or to a word. We might be repeating a word, something like that. So when you start, if you start to feel overwhelmed with big feelings, here are a couple of tips besides opening your eyes. One, remember I told you that words, focusing on a word, that's an anchor practice, right? Mostly focusing on one thing and nothing else. So you can just say in when you breathe in and out when you breathe out, over and over again until you start to feel more settled, and then you can let go of repeating the word. Another great response to feeling overwhelmed, this works whether you're practicing in meditation or kids are practicing, or it also works if you're out on the playground, is just breathe in for 4, hold for as long as you're comfortable, and breathe out for 8. And do that for a few times. That's going to help you settle down again. Your nervous system will settle a little bit, and then you're going to be able to see what's happening around you more clearly. Moving is a terrific way to release nervous energy. We do it with kids, and just by shaking your arms like this or rubbing your hands like this, either standing or sitting. And then also walking in nature, walking in the hallway, walking from the kitchen table back to the kitchen sink a few times. Mindfully walking, focusing on each step, that sort of thing is really a very useful practice to help us settle if we're starting to feel overwhelmed. And if none of that works, if you still feel overwhelmed, it's really time to take a break. There's no rush to push through these strong feelings. It's no reason to white knuckle it. So take a break if you need, and then come back later. The break could just be a couple of seconds, or the break could be for the rest of the day, and you try again the next day. If you're facilitating groups, strong emotions are going to come up while you are leading a group, or most likely, if you lead a group over time, several groups over time, you'll have an experience of strong emotions coming up to kids. And so a couple of things to remember when you are leading a group of kids, please keep your eyes open, just as you would if you were teaching a math class or a science class. If a child starts to feel restless or overwhelmed, please skillfully just bring that practice to a close. You're not going to draw attention to the child who is feeling overwhelmed or might have tears, but you do want to just close the practice. Acknowledge feelings that come up, but don't draw too much attention to them. When appropriate, ask for a group of supports. If someone says, I'm feeling sad, you can acknowledge that and then say, has anybody else felt sad too? And often there will be people raising their hand that they too have felt sad, even if they don't feel sad right now. Make sure you contain whatever this discussion is. You'll see when I'm saying skillfully in the practice, acknowledge feelings, but don't draw too much attention to them. These are strategies for containing the discussion, because a tender topic can quickly become the subject of a playground conversation. And then have a referral system, a supervisor or a peer support group in place, so that if things come up in the classes that you're leading, you can ask your colleagues to help you troubleshoot or brainstorm ways to support the child or the parents who are in the group. So let's talk a little bit more about the quality of balance that we've been talking about, and 2 other life skills, seeing and reframing, these 2 coupled together, and how they work in this practice. So remember, we were talking about the our nervous system and the fight, flight, and freeze response, and that inner watchdog that is there to guard against danger. But sometimes that inner watchdog can get it wrong and tell us that there's something is dangerous when it's not. Another aspect of that is a cognitive bias that's known as the negativity bias. It's another very useful survival mechanism that was wired into us from long, long ago. But sometimes in modern life, it can go a little haywire. So the idea of a negativity bias is that we're just plain wired to focus more on what we think is threatening than what we think is good. It makes sense, right? By focusing more on experiences that feel threatening and dangerous, then we're able to keep ourselves safe and our loved ones safe. But sometimes that means that we're focusing on experiences that really aren't that threatening or dangerous, but they're taking up all of our bandwidth. So there are awareness practices that we do that help acknowledge this bias, but expand our perspective. And we call them focusing on the good. So it's easy to get caught up in a mental loop of focusing on our problems, especially during hard times. So what we can do is, if we become aware that, we're caught in that mental loop again, we're focusing on the problems, we can interrupt that loop. We're not pretending the problems aren't there. We're not sweeping those problems under the rug. We interrupt the loop and instead take a moment to focus on the good, to just soak in some of the good things that are happening right now. Then we can break out of that mental loop and make some room, some space to think, and then gratitude or appreciation tends to emerge naturally. So we do a lot of appreciation practices with kids, not just when they're caught in a mental loop, but just in the general day-to-day life, to try to help develop this habit of gratitude and appreciation. I mean, key thing to remember in an appreciation practice is the idea isn't to ignore the difficulties in life or the challenges. We always acknowledge what is difficult, but then we want to expand our perspective to also include good things, because my guess is there will always be something good that you can include even when times are really, really tough. So that's what we try to do with these appreciation practices, especially when times aren't tough, so the kids get in the habit of noticing the good in their life and without denying the challenges. So remember that negativity bias, that we tend to focus more on the challenges. This is one way to sort of help undermine that and to have a broader perspective or view. It's reframing. So we've talked about attention, we've talked about balance, we've talked about the life skills, quieting, focusing, seeing, and reframing. And now we're going to talk about the last 2 life skills, caring and connecting, which are under this general umbrella of compassion, the quality of compassion. So we're going to look at caring and connecting, and we're going to emphasize here the importance not just of connecting with other people, caring about other people, being kind to other people, but also of connecting to ourselves, taking care of ourselves and being kind to ourselves. When we take care of ourselves, we tend to feel more grounded. When we connect to nature in a way that's natural and uncontrived, that tends to help us feel more grounded too. When we connect with other people, strong relationships with a less guarded, with a more relaxed, with a more open mind, then we're really able to connect in a meaningful way. And interpersonal connection is essential, and it is one of the most powerful ways that we can regulate ourselves and regulate one another. One of the things that often happens in family and school-based conflicts is, in family and school-based contexts, is that there's conflicts. And we think of it like as a tug of war. That's a conflict where two people are just pulling against each other and nobody is willing to let go. And I encourage you to think about conflict management or managing conflicts in the family through the lens of something we call the backwards law, which is a term coined by Alan Watts, I think in the 50s. It's the law of reverse effect. The idea that sometimes the harder we try at something, the less efficient we're going to be. Doesn't mean we don't do our best, doesn't mean we don't try hard, but we have to understand at the point we get to the law of diminishing returns. One of the ways we can do that is by, if we're in a conflict, how often do you think you could just drop the rope? Is this a conflict that really needs to happen? If it's not a conflict that really needs to happen, if the outcome doesn't matter that much to you, then you can just drop the rope and see what happens. And sometimes it's quite a surprise when you're not pulling back on that rope, when you're not engaging in the conflict, it changes the entire dynamic and relationship, often in really terrific and surprising ways. If you do need to manage this conflict, if this is something that matters to you and you need to set a healthy boundary, you can still ask yourself, is this the right time? This is something that I need to deal with. You know, one way of looking at it, is this the hill I want to die on? I don't know if you've heard that cliche. It may be something you need to set a boundary for, but it may not be the right time. Is there a way to do this that is more useful? Is there a way to do this that's more compassionate? Is there a way to do this so that you're not really hurting somebody's feelings? So maybe there's another time, in another way, you can put your foot down on this conflict. And those are two different approaches. Just drop the rope or put it off until later, that utilize this law of reverse effect, the backward law, and help us manage conflicts at home and in school. And another way of caring and connecting and to ourselves and to others is really learning about letting things be. It's a bit of what we're talking about with the backwards law too, and the law of reverse effects. Sometimes we don't have to stay in there and fight it out. Sometimes we can just let it be. And that happens in relationships, and it also happens with ourselves. Sometimes there are strong feelings, strong ideas that we have, hurts that we have, that we want to acknowledge. We don't want to pretend that they don't exist, but that we can then let be or just let go. And this game that we do with kids called Pink Bubble, where we put that, imagine putting this old hurt or disappointment into a pink bubble and watching it fly away, is one way we help explain that, and one way we're able to explain this idea to kids. So we're getting close to closing now, and I just want to reinforce for you that we're not going to be mindful 24/7. I mean, as hard as we try, as much as we practice, as good as our intentions, it's really not realistic to expect ourselves to be mindful all of the time. We're going to mess up sometimes. There is absolutely no such thing as a perfect parent, as a perfect teacher, as a perfect caregiver, as a perfect child, as a perfect daughter, as a perfect student. So holding that lightly, holding the idea, the intention to be mindful lightly, and with a sense of humor, is another great way to be compassionate and to care for yourself and others. So you are likely to lose it sometimes. I certainly lose it sometimes. And when that happens, I want you to remember something, that the wisdom does not come from being perfect. Because like I said, there's no such thing as a perfect parent or a caregiver. Wisdom comes from being present. And being present means noticing that you've lost it. And then waiting until you settle down, using some of these mindfulness-based strategies we talked about to help self-regulate, and then go back into the situation, acknowledge your mistake, and work towards repair, especially with children. Very frequently, this process of losing it, making a mistake, recognizing it, coming back and saying, hey, buddy, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. I lost my temper. What can we do to feel better? What can we do to fix this? Modeling that is sometimes a more profound teaching for the child than if you had gotten it right in the first place. So remember, wisdom isn't about being perfect. It's about being present, and that you can always circle back and repair if you make a mistake. So that brings us kind of to a close of this presentation on the life skills and the qualities that make up the Inner Kids program and that can be trained through kids and families through the practice of mindfulness and meditation. And the take-home point, again, is that this type of everyday freedom, it allows you to have peacefulness even when what's happening around you is chaotic. It's still going to rain. There's still going to be problems in life. It's not a cure-all, but it is a way of being that allows you to be able to be centered, to be able to be grounded, and to have built the capacity to tolerate the difficulties in life without getting entirely knocked off your being. And it's through this process of trainable life skills, starting with attention, balance, and compassion. Those are the qualities, and then the life skills of quieting, focusing, seeing, reframing, caring, and connecting, by really practicing and working to develop these qualities and these life skills. This is the process through which we transform. And that's what excites me the most about this work. Remember, we're talking about the experience of mindfulness. Well, this is how we get there, through this process of working with our emotions and working with our awareness and being compassionate and kind. That's how we can transform. And remember that ripple effect. We start by transforming ourselves, and then our families, our community, and the planet. And change really begins to happen when we recognize that this is all possible, that these qualities that support emotional freedom, that they're available to all of us, and that they are qualities that we can train if we just put in a little bit of the time and the effort and the heart and the love. So thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. And I hope that this was helpful to you.
So that is the main presentation. I hope you enjoyed that. If you recall, she talked about the pink bubble activity. That was when she was describing or discussing compassion and as a way to develop the life skills of caring and connecting. And we're going to join Susan as she demonstrates that mindful game next. If you're ready to run that tape, we'll go ahead and start with that.
Hi, my name is Susan Kaiser Greenland, and I just couldn't be happier than to spend this time right now practicing mindfulness with you. And today we're going to practice letting go. It's not the same as giving up, but just letting go sometimes of the things that bug us. So one of the great things about mindfulness is that it helps us develop and build these universal qualities that are inside all of us. And one of those qualities is this quality of allowing, this quality of being able to be with whatever is happening when it's happening. Not that we're not going to try to change it at some point, not that we like what's happening, but just to recognize this is what's happening now. Nothing I can do about it right now, but maybe there's something I can do about it later. You might be seeing some things coming in the frame of this, and this is what they are. These are balloons, and they're going to be part of our mindfulness exercise today. So are you ready to give it a try? Okay, so today we're going to practice letting go, but not giving up. So let's get ourselves comfortable. That's the most important thing. You can be standing, or you could be sitting, or you could be lying down. But what's important is that your back is relaxed and straight. And there go those balloons again. Your back is relaxed and straight, and that you are closing your eyes if you're comfortable closing your eyes. And if you're not comfortable closing your eyes, that's okay. But often it's easier to practice this kind of practice, especially with our eyes closed, because this is called a visualization practice, where we imagine something in our head. And sometimes that's a lot easier to do when our eyes are closed. Okay, are you ready? Okay, so close your eyes if you're comfortable. And I want you to imagine something that bugs you. Not a huge thing that bugs you, not the worst thing that's going on in your life, but something like about that big, something that's bothering you. And just take a moment and feel what that feels like in your body right now. What's that feel like? Maybe you feel it someplace in your body. Maybe you feel it in your chest, or maybe you feel it in your tummy, or maybe you feel it with headaches or a sore neck. So see where that tension that comes with having something bug you shows up in your body. So one way to see that is by practicing mindfulness. So close your eyes if you're comfortable closing your eyes. If not, it's okay to keep them open. And I want you just to feel what's going on in your body. I feel a lot of tension in my neck because I've been working at my computer a lot and I've had a lot of stress. How about you? Do you feel anything in your neck? Sometimes people feel it in their chest. Other times people in their tummy. Do you feel tension anyplace? Sometimes people feel tension in their forehead. Just take a moment and scan your body from the tip of your head to the tips of your toes, starting with the crown of your head, moving down through your skull, like you have a skull cap on, like one of those winter knit caps that keep your head warm. See if you can feel yourself pulling that cap down over your head to your jaw. See if you can smile a little bit. Relax your jaw. Your shoulders, often our shoulders are up, so you can drop them down to your upper arms, to your lower arms, into your upper legs, your knees and your lower legs, to your ankles and feet. See with the scan of your body like that, if anything showed up that's a little bit tight. And if it did, just notice that. You don't have to do anything about it. Sometimes just noticing it changes it. Okay, now that we're relaxed and we're in sync with how our body is feeling, I want you, if you can, to close your eyes and imagine something that's getting on your nerves. Maybe right now nothing's getting on your nerves, and that's okay. That's actually kind of terrific. But something probably has gotten on your nerves at some point. So see if something's bugging you and bring that to mind. I wonder, when you think about what's bugging you, does something change in your body? Does it feel the same or differently? It's always a good question to ask, and the answer is not the same for everybody. Okay, so whatever came to mind that was bugging you, something like a bad test with a bad grade on a test, something like that, or something like maybe there was a birthday party you weren't invited to, or something like maybe you got punished for something that you didn't feel you should have been punished for. That's the kind of bugging things I'm talking about. So whatever the feeling is associated with what's bugging you right now, I want you to go back and think about these balloons again. And look how in these balloons, there are very cool different round circles, right? And just think of those as things that bug people. They might not all be what's bugging you, but those are some things that bug people. And people put those things inside their bubble here, this kind of pinkish bubble. So imagine that there's a pink bubble like this near you, and that you can put inside of it whatever is bugging you. And when you do, I want you just to imagine that whatever's bugging you, you're letting go, you're putting in the pink bubble, and you see it out there in the sky. And as the pink bubble starts to float away, along with whatever it is that's bugging you, if you feel like it, you can even wave goodbye and wish it well. Goodbye, pink bubble. Goodbye, whatever it is that's bothering me. And just watch it float away. So this pink bubble practice is a very useful practice when things are getting on our nerves and they're starting to really take over. It feels very strong. These things that are on our nerves feel very strong. What we can do is we can let them go. And we can let them go by closing our eyes, imagining a pink balloon or a pink bubble, something like this, putting this inside, and then letting it float away. So thank you very much. I so enjoyed practicing mindfulness with you today, and I hope it was helpful.
Okay, well, that was actually my favorite of all the ones that we had to offer you. And I thought we're a little early maybe for the Q&A, but we had one more to show, but it was going to take us over our time to start the Q&A. And I thought it would be nice to just have a little extra time to talk with Susan. And so while you're sending your questions in, I thought, Susan, I don't know if you heard my introduction, but I mentioned that you had shared a story about how you first started into meditation that I just found heartening because, we all have our stories of starting to try to meditate and maybe it not going so well. And it was nice. If you are willing to share that, I think it would be fun for everyone to hear.
Happy to share this. This was, well over 30 years ago. And I was a young mom. I had a 2.5-year-old, I had a toddler, and I was pregnant with my second. And I was a lawyer at that time, a full-time lawyer in a very stressful job. And my husband, who is just fine, he's terrific. He will be back here soon, got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And it was at a time that his prognosis was really lousy. He got into a clinical trial and he was very, very fortunate, but his prognosis at that time was lousy. And, but he went into a full chemo treatment. And I wanted to start looking for alternative ideas to help him. Now, you might think I found meditation, but I didn't. I found food. I started reading all about food, and I became like a young mom under stress can be absolutely convinced and obsessed that we were eating, poisonous food. So I was in the kitchen on a stool, very pregnant at this point, pulling out absolutely every bit of anything that was processed food and throwing it, I remember like it was yesterday, a big black garbage bag. And my husband, Seth, comes in and says, honey, I got a babysitter tonight. We're going to go and learn meditation. And I thought, we can't go learn meditation. I've got to get all this food out. And then I thought, oh, he's sick. I mean, I was just so nuts at that time. Oh, he's sick. Of course he needs to learn meditation. So I basically told him that. And he said, no, honey, I'm not the one who needs meditation. You need meditation because you're driving me crazy. So we went to the Zen Center in New York. And we sat and we had a 20-minute session and we learned about meditation, and they took us downstairs and we sat on our cushions and we were facing a white wall. And I lasted on that cushion maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops. And I went chasing out of the room like my hair was on fire. I just couldn't Sitting still probably was the first time I had sat still since, we really got his diagnosis. And sitting still and feeling my feelings was just something that didn't have the capacity to do. My husband, on the other hand, sat there for the full 20 or 30 minutes, and he came out, he said, "What happened to you?" So that's the story. I eventually, we ended up moving. We were living in the city then. I ended up taking a leave of absence from my job. We moved out of the city. We were more in the country. I started listening to audio tapes at that time of, actually it was Sharon Salzberg. And I talked to Sharon about this recently. Apparently they were kind of audio tapes that she had made a lot of them, but that they weren't really published yet. And Jack Kornfeld had Path with Heart, and Joseph Goldstein had something. And I listened to those tapes over and over again. At that point, I couldn't go and sit a retreat, even though it wasn't that far away. And that's how I learned to meditate.
That's a lovely story. So that's encouragement for anybody who is trying to teach this to other people and realizes that they need to learn it themselves, and it's not as easy as it sounds, maybe. So we do have one question here, which I actually, when I started getting excited about this, my kids were in middle school, and I was their mom, so I knew nothing, and had, I did my best to try to teach them little bits here and there. But this question is, what are the best ways to break through resistance to engaging in mindfulness activities, especially with older kids?
Well, it's by starting yourself. It's by modeling it. The more that we practice, one of the things that we forget is that teaching mindfulness or asking your kids to practice mindfulness isn't the same as teaching them to play the piano. And often we'll bring piano teachers in, and we don't need to learn how to play the piano. And the piano teacher, the guitar teacher can teach the kids. It's not the same. It can be the same with mindfulness. There's some benefit, but the real benefit comes from mindfulness when the whole system starts to practice. So as a parent, if you begin to practice yourself, and it can be a little bit tough at times, and the real takeaway from my story about how I started is that sitting still is not always the best way to practice when you have big emotions. So if big emotions are coming up, you don't have to wait until they calm down. You can just move and walk and do other sorts of practice, and then get to the point that you can sit. But so when we start to practice ourselves, there's that ripple effect I talked about in the tape, where if we're just a little less neurotic, if we're just a little bit more patient, if we are a little bit less reactive, there is an effect. People around us start to notice it. And kids will say things like, "Mom, maybe you want to go and take some time, go and practice." But once they start seeing that, they do pick things up, even if they don't seem like a formal practice. For instance, my son now has a very, very steady practice. He's 27. My daughter does not have a steady sitting practice. She's 30. But both of them have very much integrated these mindful life skills I've talked about. Not as much through formal practice, but through informal. The other thing I'll say is stealth mindfulness is key. Not talking mindfulness all the time is like a great recipe to turn your kids off. But just describing, as you do when you're teaching anything, what you're going to do right now. Hey, let's just take a second and sit and just feel our breathing. Or, hey, let's just take a second and just settle down. So feel your feet against the floor. And while your kids are upset, really being able to interject these ideas, or what we call golden threads, these universal themes about mindfulness, about patience, about keeping an open mind. Another thing is there's some wonderful stories. So my son, for instance, will say to this day that the story that impacted him the most about all the stuff when he was growing up with mindfulness was a story about a farmer and a son and his horse, and how even now in his late 20s, he still remembers that story when things are uncertain or he has to deal with uncertainty. So there's a number of different, stories that you can tell, or their teachings in that way, that we can tell older kids, and even if they're rolling their eyes at the time, if they see you modeling it, it has a way of, kind of seeping in.
That's great. That's great. Someone has a question about suggestions for implementing practices in school settings that are larger classroom settings rather than one-on-one or small groups.
Well, most of the mindful games are set up for either a large setting or one-on-one. There's a lot of, do we know what age we're talking about? Because it's different depending on the grade.
Right. It doesn't say, so maybe if you can give an
Sure.
example of each.
So for the younger kids, there's all sorts of simple things, like balloon arms is a terrific one. It's just the kids learn that when they see your hands on your head, that they do the same. And then you start moving your arms up and down and up and down, and they sync their motions to yours. And then as soon as you can encourage children to lead the activity, you have children lead the activity. And then you can also do the same with breathing, and breathing 1, 2, 3. Those are great classroom management devices that have a grounding effect and a quieting effect on the classroom. And then also things like, we take balls in a classroom and we will toss them around like beach balls, or Nerf balls, ones that you can actually toss in a classroom. And then when the child catches the ball, they can play one of these games. Like right now, my mind feels, my body feels go. So right now, my mind feels excited because I'm talking to you. My body feels alert because I'm talking to you. And then I would throw the ball and go. And then somebody else would say that mind feels this way, body feels this way. And you can, as you see me doing this now, you don't even need a ball to do this. You can take an imaginary ball and you can throw it, somebody can grab it. This also helps with eye contact, which is also a terrific connecting tool. And there are all sorts of games like that that we can play in a classroom that we drop in during transitions or when we need a little time to have some fun, that are also grounding or mindfulness activities.
Great. How do you manage in a big classroom the kids who are being disruptive during a mindful activity?
Well, one of the very important things if you're a teacher is to use the same classroom management skills you do for mindfulness as you do for math. And in the beginning, those may not be what we would call mindful classroom management skills. Eventually, some of these classroom management skills are the things I'm talking about now, these kind of call and repeats, or the balloon arms, ways to have attention and then kind of redirect in a mindful way. But we need to make sure that the children understand that we view the mindfulness exercises to be an important part of their learning day in the same way we view math or science or reading. So in the same way in your classroom that you would manage your classroom for disruptive students in one of the more hard academic subjects, those same rules apply when we're practicing mindfulness. There's a couple of other real simple tricks too. One of the things that just happens, you've got to keep your sense of humor because people start laughing, people start giggling, and you want to encourage that. So one of the things that happens, especially if you're in a younger grade level where children can be sitting in a circle, even in second and third grade, is to not penalize turning your back to the center of the circle. And that's very, very useful because what often happens is just people catch each other's eyes and start giggling, and that's just normal. And you don't want to make that seem like a bad thing or make the children feel, shamed. But what we can do is just quietly go over and suggest, hey, why don't you just turn your back to the circle for a second until you settle, and then, go back and turn around. And before you know it, the kids start doing this themselves. The kids start sitting with their backs to the center and looking out when they're starting to feel that they are going to giggle or just want to be, more contained.
Great. So do you have a workbook or a book with these details and ideas? I did talk a little bit about that, but I'll let you share.
There's a mindful games book that has the theory and the games. And there's a set of activity cards, which I have to tell you are far more popular. And what we like about the cards is that you just pull the card out and then you just read the instructions. So there's very clear instructions for leading the game. And then there's tips, and then there's adaptations for different ages. So they're the mindful games activity cards. And a lot of teachers and anybody running groups, a lot of people like those and use them for remarkably wide age ranges. Even people tell me they use them with adults.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So I shared at the beginning that I got to attend the workshop that you did in Nashville a few years ago, which was fantastic and so much fun. Are you going to be doing more? I know you're working steadily on this your new book coming up. Are you going to be doing more workshops? Do you know?
I don't have right now. The pandemic was crazy. Yeah,
I like to forget about that.
I've never worked harder, and it was all Zooming, and so much has moved to Zoom. I like the in-person workshops, and I thought that workshop was great. I think that was the perfect size. I like being able to break up into small groups, so I hope to do that again. I would be surprised if I didn't do it again when the next book comes out.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't have plans yet because we're not yet really comfortable doing those in person.
No, of course not. I shut it out until I make plans for dinner. And then I realize, wait a minute, we can't eat inside, and it's like, I get to the restaurant sometimes before I remember that we're in a pandemic. But so that's one great way to learn these things is if when we're out of the pandemic and you can, if when you're doing workshops again, that's a great way. The cards are a great way. And it really just, my friends in Nashville who sponsored the workshop also did the mindful schools training.
Yes,
so
yeah.
They had a lot of good things to say about that. And also just good things to say about get a partner and get out there with your partner. If you're in a classroom, go into each other's classrooms and do them together. If you're a therapist, run a group with another therapist and just practice. Because at first it is a little awkward if you're not used to doing these kinds of things with kids.
Absolutely.
And you just have to get out there and do it.
I love the co-teaching experience. I always learn from it, even after all of these years. I think it's very, very helpful. That group in Nashville, I don't know if they're still in place, but I know Mary Agee, A-G-E-E, certainly is, and she does fantastic work. So, I don't mean to, but reaching out to her, because and also there's somebody named Shelley Sowell, who is a therapist, and she's also near you, and she's also doing fantastic work. So there are other great people doing great work out there locally. And then on my website, there's all sorts of videos. It's almost like too many videos, but if you go, there's a watch tab and you can watch all sorts of videos. There's a listen tab and you can listen to all sorts of video audio. So there's a lot of material there to supplement the books.
Yes, it's really a great resource for learning this stuff. Yeah. So I don't know if there are other questions. I'm not seeing other questions coming through.
So what are you practicing with kids?
I'm not, but when the pandemic, if it ever ends, one of my goals is to volunteer in schools. That's been on my list of things to do for about 5 years. And I'm at that point where I haven't done a lot of work with kids in schools for a long time. And so, I'm partly preaching to myself is just get out there and do it, because it's not going to feel easy at first.
Get out there to do it, and don't forget your own personal practice, because the key is to teach from your own felt experience. So If you really are somebody who settles in and is able to do wonderful sitting meditation, then go from that. If you're somebody who, like me, I'm more of a mover, you can tell with all the hand motions and everything. So moving during practice is very helpful to me. So really finding what it is that resonates with you and how you get that experience of mindfulness that I was talking about in the video. I mean, it's so easy to get oriented toward the tools, toward the life skills that we're building, and toward the self-help, which is huge. And honestly, unless if we're able to ground our nervous systems and settle ourselves, it's very hard to go beyond. However, when we do, whether it's sitting or walking or standing or lying down, and actually get that aha moment of just really feeling what we're talking about with respect to that experience of mindfulness, which is not a lot of thoughts and just feeling kind of everything is connected. That's what you teach from. That's what keeps you going. That's what helps you when you have doubts. That's what helps you, gives you the motivation to go, because working with kids and with families can be challenging because everybody tends to be so overwhelmed. But when you start having some of these experiences of being open and being present and feeling connected, and just that deep sense of happiness, even if it's not peaceful around you, that's what really can fuel people to do this type of work for decades.
That's great. Yeah. Filling up your own cup first.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good. Great advice. Well, I think we're about running out of time. So thank you very, very much. This has just been fantastic. It's great to see you. And I guess we're putting up a link here. Oh, for the evaluation. Yes. If people who want continuing education credits, please fill out that evaluation form. And tomorrow we're starting at 8:20. So remember that. And Susan, thank you again so much. It's great to see you. Best of luck with your book.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.